On a sunny day, Satoru Mikami looks back on his life on what he hadn't accomplished yet. All he hadn't done was try to get a girlfriend. Later, Satoru heard his name was being called by his junior at work, Temura. Temura introduces his new fiancée, Miho Sawatari, to Satoru. While the three was having a pleasant talk and was about to head to a nearby restaurant, Satoru was stabbed in the street by a random man with a knife. Luckily, Temura and Miho were safe because Satoru had pushed them to safety. While blood was pouring out from Satoru, a mysterious voice can be heard, granting him a body that doesn't require blood as well as various abilities like Predator, Great Sage, and various resistances. The voice can only be heard by Satoru, while the surrounding people couldn't hear the voice. Satoru Mikami requested his last wish to be fulfilled by Temura, which was to destroy the contents of his hard drives. When Satoru awakens, he discovers that he has been turned into a slime. With nothing else to do while he comes to terms with his condition, Mikami eats hippocute herbs and collects magic ore and eventually, after 3 months, settles into his great sage powers and gains an odd companion in the form of a voice in his head that explains various things about the things that Mikami comes into contact with. Eventually, Mikami accidentally launches himself into Veldora while learning how to swim. Veldora teaches the blind slime how to see using magic, through which Mikami finally confirms that he indeed has been turned into a slime, as well as learning the identity of his teacher, Veldora the Storm Dragon. 300 years ago, Veldora was trapped in the cave using the magic spell Unlimited Imprisonment by a hero, and now he only expects to live for another 100 years before his dwindling magical power finally kills him. Mikami wants to use Predator to study the barrier, and find a way of dismantling it using Great Sage. At a minimum, Mikami will contain Veldora's dwindling magic reserves and ensure that he doesn't fade away. Veldora agrees to the plan, but before they continue he gives the slime the name Rimuru and asks the slime for a last name for both of them, Tempest. Once the newly christened Rimuru Tempest eats the dragon, he learns, to his disappointment, that he can no longer communicate with him. At the same time, various monsters and governments sense the dragon's disappearance and begin moving to investigate and take advantage. Instead, Rimuru eventually finds the way out of Veldora's cave thanks to a trio of adventurers sent to investigate Veldora's prison. Over the next month, Rimuru hunts and eats a variety of different monsters and steals their abilities, learns how to swim and fire a water blade, and continues to strip the cave of resources. Finally, Rimuru finds his way out of the cave and eventually comes into contact with a group of goblins. The goblins explain that after the disappearance of their guardian deity, Veldora, various monsters have started moving into the forest trying to stake their claim. Among them, a group of direwolves have been attacking them. Rimuru, thinking briefly on his past life and his inability to say no, agrees to help the goblins fend off the wolves. As the first step to helping the goblins fend off the Tempest wolves, he has the goblins dismantle their homes and build fences that he reinforces using the sticky and steel silks he got from the giant spider in the cave, and builds traps using the nearly invisible thread. When the wolves arrive, they get caught in Rimuru's silk traps and the goblins hit them with crude bows and arrows, putting up an effective defense. The direwolf boss is undeterred and charges in, getting caught up in Rimuru's silk trap. Rimuru gives the boss one chance to turn back and run, and when he refuses, he decapitates him using Water Blade. With the matter of the enemy leader dead, Rimuru devours the former boss's corpse and takes on his form, giving the wolves the option of submission, retreating, or death. While it initially seems like the other wolves intend to keep fighting, they ultimately submit to Rimuru. The next morning, Rimuru, who realizes that he is now responsible for now not one but 2 groups of monsters, decides to take measures to make sure they get along. As a start, realizing that he has approximately the same number of goblins and wolves, he has them pair up and dub them Goblin Riders. The second issue, realizing that none of the other monsters there have names, decides to name every one of them for the sake of his own convenience. In honor of the dead Rigger, his brother is also named Rigger, while the chief is named Riggard, with each individual glowing yellow briefly when named. When the time comes to name the wolves, in spite of the chief insisting that he breaks for a while, Rimuru simply takes his family name of Tempest and Wolf's racial name of Fang and dubs the new leader of the pack Ranga. Suddenly, Rimuru's body collapses and enters low activity mode, the Great Sage informing him that he used up too much magical power. When Rimuru awakens, he sees an unfamiliar young lady watching over his body. Riggard, now in a much bigger and much stronger body in the form of a hobgoblin, comes in and explains that they've evolved thanks to Rimuru naming them. Likewise, Ranga comes in and explains that because of the name Rimuru gave him, they've evolved into Tempest Wolves. As a start, Rimuru assigns the monsters into a group to hunt and gather food, thus averting one crisis for the time being. Once the group arrives outside of Dworgen, Rimuru instructs most of the goblins and the wolves to stay back while he enters the lineup with Gopta. Once in the lineup, Rimuru and Gopta are quickly harassed by a group of adventurers who see them as weak monsters and wish to mug them. Rimuru assumes the form of the newly evolved former wolf chief and uses intimidation to try to scare the adventurers off. Met with overwhelming success, Rimuru terrorizes the other people in the lineup and is immediately captured by Dworgen's guards. Fortunately, Rimuru's story lines up with eyewitness reports, and since no one was hurt the guard captain, Kaido feels inclined to let them go after a bare minimum amount of time. At that time, one of the guards charge in and report that a group of miners have been injured in an attack by an Armorsaurus and they have no potions to heal them. Rimuru chimes in and trades in a large amount of his high-quality health potion in exchange for his freedom. Once the dwarfs are healed, Kaido agrees to take him to the best blacksmith that he knows. Kaido takes Rimuru to his brother Kaijin, who also turns out to be the boss of the 3 miners Rimuru healed. While the dwarf is grateful for the safe return of his employees, he is already in the middle of an order for the kingdom. Kaijin has to make 20 magic swords for the kingdom, and thanks to the work of a minister named Vesta, he has no time and no magic ore to make them. Rimuru recalls his time in the cave and regurgitates refined ore in the form of a chunk of magisteel. He also requests the 1 magic sword that Kaijin has already produced. Predating the sword, Rimuru instructs the great sage to manufacture 19 copies of the weapon made out of magic steel, and regurgitates them, thereby completing Kaijin's order for him. In exchange, Rimuru explains that he needs the use of an architect to build his village and a craftsman to make clothes and weapons for his people. The brothers Kaijin and Kaido have a heartfelt farewell while the king looks on. He instructs an elven assassin to apprehend the lawyer before sending her to spy on Rimuru, acknowledging him as a threat on par with the missing Veldora. At the Kingdom of Blumen's Free Union HQ, Guildmaster Fuse debriefs 3 adventurers, Gaido, Cavil, and Iren, on the state of the surrounding area. Simply put, their intelligence combined with the trio's report has confirmed 2 things. The Eastern Empires are not moving on the surrounding areas, and the second is that Veldora has indeed disappeared from his prison. With this in mind, Fuse gives the trio 3 days off before he sends them off on another investigation into the Great Forest of Jura. While the 3 are complaining, they are approached by another adventurer named Shizu, who asks to go with them on their mission as the forest is on her way anyway. Meanwhile, Rimuru has returned to the goblin village. Under Kaijin's instruction, the goblins are now learning how to make tools and weapons, while Garm has taught the goblins how to make proper clothing. Dord, who is teaching them craftsmanship, and Miad is guiding them and make buildings. Cavil, Gaido, Iren, and Shizu are being chased by a horde of giant ants, several of which Shizu destroys with a magic sword and the last Rimuru dispatches with black lightning. Once they've introduced each other, Rimuru realizes that Shizu is his destined one he's meant to meet according to the elven prophecy he received. Meeting with Shizu alone, Rimuru confirms that she is from Japan and Shizu confirms the same as him. The pair share their stories of how they came to be there. Whereas Rimuru merely died and was reincarnated as a slime, Shizu was summoned to this world by force on the tail end of the Second World War. The individual who summoned her pulled her out of the firebombing of Japan, so to cheer her up, Rimuru shows her images of the rebuilt Japan and of it being put back together. However, the mood is suddenly interrupted by some kind of painful injury on Shizu's part. While she seems fine, Rimuru is called away to discuss the building of the village. Shizu meanwhile has a flashback of her summoning and of the man who did the deed, leaving her body severely burned in the process. Deducing that she had an affinity for fire, Shizu's summoner forcibly bonded her to a fire spirit named Ifrit. One day, shortly after being summoned to the New World and bonded to Ifrit, Shizu and her summoner/master are attacked by the great Majin Koenig. Deciding to treat the situation as an opportunity, Leon has his newly minted minion incinerate the birdman. Satisfied, Leon asks the girl her name and decides to name her Shizu. After Shizu's injuries have been treated, she starts wandering around the nearby forest, where she encounters a young girl named Perino, who has befriended an orphan fox monster that Shizu names Pizu, who grows bigger as a result. Deciding that the monster seemed friendly, the two bring him back with them to Leon's castle as their pet. Unfortunately, Pizu becomes openly hostile to Leon, and as a result, Ifrit takes over Shizu's body and incinerates both the monster and his owner, leaving Shizu severely traumatized. Waking up from the nightmare, the adult Shizu finds herself in the goblin village where Ifrit's aura is now acting up. Though Shizu likes the town, her quest to track down her summoner lures her elsewhere. That said, Rimuru states she's welcomed back at any time. On her way out of the village, Ifrit finally breaks free from Shizu's control and takes over her body and goes on a rampage. Rimuru orders the goblins to evacuate and confronts Shizu with Cavil's party, with the adventurers realizing that Shizu is really a veteran hero, also known as the Conqueror of Flames. To combat his enemies, Ifrit summons several salamanders to fight alongside him. Though Rimuru's water blade attack is initially ineffective against the fire spirits, he mixes it with Iren's icicle lance attack to create the icicle shotgun for use against the monsters. Once the salamanders have been defeated, Rimuru orders Ranga to take the adventurers away to safety. Confronting Ifrit alone, Rimuru is initially caught in a trap when he's consumed in a circle flare by Ifrit. Although Rimuru initially freaks out, Great Sage reminds him that he has thermal fluctuation resistance, which immunizes him against fire-based attacks. Instead, Rimuru uses Ifrit's own attack as a smokescreen to bind him in steel silk, followed by swallowing him using Predator and separating him from Shizu. Once inside of Rimuru's stomach, Ifrit is confronted by Veldora, who laughs at Ifrit as he claims that he cannot defeat Rimuru. Rimuru is inside of Shizu's room waiting for her safe recovery. Shizu is depressed as she nearly killed her friends as Ifrit again. However, Shizu has reached the end of her natural lifespan and Ifrit's will has overtaken hers, resulting in the rampage the day before. Hence Shizu's last quest, to find Leon and make him tell her the information she wants to know. While Shizu is glad she got to spend the last few days of her life with such good people, she has a new request, not for Rimuru, but for Satoru Mikami. Shizu wishes to die among the memories of her homeland so that she is not subjected to the cruel cycle of reincarnation of this world, and thus asks that the slime eat her as he had the cursed monster that had tormented her. Rimuru agrees and declares that he will find the man responsible for her fate and make him take responsibility for his actions. Inside of Rimuru, Shizu is reunited with the souls of her slain friends and her dead mother as her long hard life ends peacefully. Later, Cavil's party and Rigard arrive in Shizu's room to find what they realize is actually Rimuru in the form of a naked human, a slightly younger androgynous version of Shizu with blue hair and golden eyes. Giving the group an explanation as to what happened and proving he is who he states he is, Rimuru transforms back into slime and apologizes to the group for his impromptu private burial. Before the three adventurers leave, they ask Rimuru to turn back into Shizu's form so that they can at least say farewell to their friend's image. Before the three adventurers leave though, Rimuru has the dwarfs manufacture new and improved equipment for the three of them. The group in turn promises to give a positive review of the village and recommend non-interference with their affairs. In the meantime though, an orc is traveling through the desert, and just when he collapses from exhaustion he is met with Gelmud, who offers him meat and a name, Geld. Rimuru takes the liberty of training the more dangerous of his abilities inside of the sealed cave, where he figures he won't hurt anyone. Shizu's unique skill Degenerate allows her to fuse together in separate skills to produce new skills as needed. One of Shizu's stronger creations is Black Flame, a skill that produces a highly destructive mass of black plasma, thus is yet another skill that Rimuru has to be careful with. Rimuru also confirms the function of the anti-magic mask to suppress magical power, thus while wearing it he appears to be a completely normal human. However, before he can experiment further, Rimuru receives an emergency request for aid from Ranga via thought communication. Ranga's hunting party has come under attack by a group of 6 ogres. Most of the members of the party has been put to sleep by the ogre's princess, and those who are still able to fight, Ranga, Rigger, and Gobda, have only received minor injuries. Though Rimuru initially wants to settle the matter peacefully with the ogres, their leader will have none of it. By process of elimination, they have determined that Rimuru is the only one who could be responsible for the orc army that attacked their village. Their reason is based on account of the fact that he is in command of a group of monsters roughly as strong as the orcs. Rimuru commands Ranga to capture the ogre princess, while he focuses on dealing with the others. Rimuru incapacitates the hammer-wielding ogre using paralysis breath, the female warrior ogre by tying her up with sticky steel thread. He then deflects the other sword-wielding ogre with body armor and knocks him out with it, while Ranga succeeds in capturing the priestess. The eldest among the ogres identifies each of the monsters the skills came from, and in the process confirming him as the most dangerous among the ogres. Rimuru attempts another attempt at peace, tries to deduce who they have mistaken him for, though the revelation of his abilities only serves to make them more suspicious. Unfortunately, the ogre elder takes the opportunity to sneak up on and try to kill Rimuru, though he only succeeds in cutting off one of his arms. Instead, Rimuru demonstrates his high-speed regeneration and immunity towards fire-based attacks. Deciding to take things seriously, Rimuru removes his mask and produces a giant mass of black flame and black lightning. The ogre princess, however, gets between them and reveals the misunderstanding, as she has determined that Rimuru is not the leader of the orc army that attacked them. Had that individual used this much power, they would have no need to use orcs. She's also determined that the mask he is wearing is much different than the Majin who was leading the orc army, whereas Rimuru's mask seals his aura, the one the Majin was wearing didn't. Now that the ogres have calmed down, Rimuru reabsorbs his attack and reveals his true slime nature before leading both groups back to the village to determine who is responsible for the army of violent thugs that attacked the ogres' village, confirming that none of the ogres have names in the process. A crowd of tense hobgoblins have gathered around Rimuru, who is taste testing meat skewers that have been prepared for him. After careful consideration, Rimuru cheerfully declares the meat good, and is quite happy to have his sense of taste back. While the various hobgoblins, dwarves, and ogres are enjoying themselves, the ogre's young master has sat down with Rigard, Rimuru, and Kaijin as he explains what happened. The most sensible conclusion is that the orcs have been given new power by a demon lord, why they don't know. Rimuru takes the liberty of noting that the ogres have settled into the village rather nicely, which leads him to wonder what the ogres plan on doing now. Naturally, the young master's current greatest ambition is to find the leader of the orcs and kill him along with as many of his subordinates as possible. Realizing that the young master doesn't have a plan at all, Rimuru instead proposes that they become his subordinates in the mutual interest of fending off the army of orcs that are wandering around the forest destroying everything in sight. It is something that the ogres need to consider carefully, so the young master goes out to think. The next morning the ogres find their resolve and agree to become Rimuru's subordinates, at least until they can hunt down and defeat the orcs' leader. As is customary with his subordinates, Rimuru names each one of the ogres. The young master is now Beniamaru. His younger sister Shuna, the female ogre is Shiin, the elderly ogre Hakuru, the other male is Sue, and finally, the hammer-wielding ogre is Kurube. Once the process is done, however, Rimuru passes out from overusing his magic again and wakes up days later to learn that the ogres have evolved into Kijin and have since been keeping themselves busy inside of the village. Hakuru has taken to bullying groups of hobgoblins and calls it training them. Kurube has inserted himself into Kaijin's blacksmith team, while Shuna and Shin have taken turns looking after Rimuru's unconscious body. The reason why naming 6 ogres took up so much of Rimuru's magic is because naming stronger monsters takes up vastly more magical power than the weak goblins. Beniamaru and Rimuru begin discussing strategy and dealing with their enemy. After having time to think about it, Beniamaru wonders if the orcs are connected to another demon known as Jelmud, who visited their village offering to name the ogres, claiming to be a lieutenant in the demon lord's army. Rimuru recognizes the name Jelmud as the one who also named Rigger and wonders if it's a coincidence. In the meantime, the orc army is making its way to the lizardman village near Lake Sis. After determining the enemy outnumbers them 2-1 and that they've already crushed the stronger ogres, the lizardman chieftain concludes that the enemy army is being led by a legendary monster known as a orc lord. Thus the chieftain calls his son Gabaru and assigns him the task of forming an alliance with the goblins in the interest of boosting their numbers. Unfortunately, while traveling to the goblin village on Overlizards, Gabaru's subordinates boost the already overconfident Gabaru by commenting that with the name given to him by a demon lord's lieutenant, Jelmud, it's only fitting that he use this crisis as an opportunity to succeed his father as chieftain. The group travels to Rimuru's village, and after making an ostentatious entrance for Gabaru, the lizardman ends up insulting Rimuru to his face in front of his subordinates, trying to recruit Ranga's pack to fight the orcs. Diffusing the situation, Ranga has got to fight Gabaru instead, with Rimuru motivating him with the carrot stick combo of a weapon from Kurobe and more of Shion's cooking. The hobgoblin uses the spear he was given as a distraction, shadow motion, to sneak up on Gabaru, and finally, he knocks him out with a kick to the back of his head, causing his subordinates to take their leader and flee as quickly as possible. In spite of Gabaru's personality and him seeming too stupid to be a scared attitude, making an alliance with the lizardmen isn't a bad idea. The orcs are in their territory, and dealing with them there is preferable than waiting for them to strike. Rimuru also wonders that if the demon lord that's backing them is the same one who hurt Shizu. But while in a meeting with his subordinates, a dryad named Trainee asks to join in, requesting that Rimuru subjugate the orc lord. The meeting between Rimuru and his subordinates and Trainee the Dryad continues. Sawe reports that he's scouted the destroyed ogre village and has confirmed that both the ogre corpses and the orc corpses have completely disappeared. According to Trainee, the surviving orcs ate them. When an orc evolves into an orc lord, they gain an ability called Starved, which works similarly but differently than Rimuru's Predator. For starters, when Rimuru consumes someone using Predator, he has a 100% chance of gaining their abilities, but they apply only to himself. Compare Starving ones, which although it has a much lower rate of success and drives the users mad with hunger, instead triggers species-wide mutations. The orcs have already gained the ogre's brute strength. Currently, they target the lizardmen's heightened speed, agility, and ability to walk on water. But the worst case scenario is when they will seek out the collection of strong monsters Rimuru has gathered together, not to mention the dryads and treants Trainee has under her protection. With the powers of all the creatures of the Jira forest combined, they will become an unstoppable plague on the world and will spread like a rapidly evolving swarm of locusts. As if further prodding Rimuru to action, Trainee also informs him that the orcs' actions are being guided by a Majin named Jelmud, who is working for a demon lord. Remembering the promise made to Shizu, Rimuru agrees to wipe the orc lord. As a start, in order to even the numbers against the 200,000 strong orcs, Sawe is assigned to establish proper diplomatic relations with the lizardman chieftain. In the meantime, Gabaru finally wakes up following his humiliating defeat by Gobta. He immediately comes to the conclusion that Gobta was the strongest fighter in the village, and that they lied to him about being weak to throw him off. One of Jelmud's colleagues, Laplace, informs him about the impending attack on the lizardman settlement, and voices his concerns that Gabaru's father might be too weak to face them. Thus Gabaru makes the decision to take over the tribe now and lead his people to victory against the orcs. Meanwhile, Sawe arrives at the Lizardman village where he forces his way into the chief's chambers. With the orc army on their doorstep, Sawe instructs the chief to hunker down in a defensive battle until Rimuru's reinforcements arrive to deal with the orcs. After rescuing one of his guards from being decapitated by Sawe after he insults Rimuru, the chief makes a few deductions. Sawe, originally an ogre and now a Kijin after being named by Rimuru, is a being of great power, therefore Rimuru must be someone of even greater power to be the one who named him. If such a person with such subordinates came to their aid, then the odds of survival, and for that matter victory for the Lizardmen, will rise dramatically. 4 days later, midway through Rimuru's reinforcements arriving, Gabaru arrives and overthrows his father as chief. Gabaru proves himself a competent military leader, waging several guerrilla battles against the orcs and thinning their numbers using hit and run tactics. However, he is caught off guard by the terror of an army that devours its own dead. This was the recap of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime episodes 1 to 12. I'll be uploading the second part soon.
How was the video? We hope it was good. If so, please check these videos. Also, please comment down your thoughts and your suggestions for future videos. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing now to show the support to our channel. We hope to see you soon with another video right in this channel. Have a nice day.